Hey everyone, Ed Helms here. You might know me as Andy from The Office or Stu from The Hangover, or you might know me as the co-founder of BGS. I know, I'm just as surprised as you. They let me co-found something. But here's the thing, we're doing it again. Yeah, this time we're leaping into our other deep love, the vast and vibrant world of country music, with something we're calling Good Country. Now, this isn't just another newsletter. Think of Good Country as a place. A place where you can explore, learn, and dig into all of what makes country good. Seriously, country music has so much going on these days, and it's coming from so many different deep and soulful places, and we're here to cover all of it, just as we've done for bluegrass and roots music at BGS for over a decade. So sign up now at goodcountrybgs.substack.com and let us bring you the many sides of country music straight to your inbox. Good Country. It's a nice place to be.
Hi, this is Basic Folk. We have honest conversations with folk musicians on the American Songwriter Podcast Network. I'm Cindy Howes. Thanks for listening today. We have Katy Kirby on, who was raised outside of Austin, Texas. Katy grew up homeschooled, enamored with Jesus, and was rocking out to Christian contemporary music from the late 90s and early 2000s. But then she went to college in Nashville, and her world opened up. She started questioning everything she believed about God and the church. She fell in with a crowd of musicians who were going through similar situations. She had a lot to let go when it came to her high school education. Her parents sent her to a private conservative Christian high school. Once she was out of it, she realized how backwards her education was, how racist and closed-minded the experience had been. She began writing her way to an understanding. She calls that time the weirdest and one of the darkest experience that I've had, trying to rewire my brain to not have a loving God that's ever present in it. She fondly looks back on her experience of learning how to play music in the church. She was 13 years old and playing bass for the first time in the church band, where she was the youngest person by at least 25 years. The relationships formed with the adults in the band were fundamental, especially in introducing Katy to the world of secular rock and pop music. The music of Peter Gabriel, Led Zeppelin, Sufjan Stevens all came to her through the other members of the band. Her debut album, Cool Dry Place, really relied on her intuition to figure out what worked best for the songs. And she talks about how that experience impacted her confidence. Well, the record is rad, and I think her intuition is spot on, and hope that she keeps following it. We'll take a listen to a song from Katy's debut album. This is Fireman, and then we'll get to our conversation with Katy Kirby on Basic Folk.
When he wants to go out with the boys, I always say of course. When he wants to be alone, I kiss his head and close the door. My baby is a fireman, my baby. And at night when we're in bed, sometimes I try to take his hand. They don't flinch away and tell me don't do something you'll regret. My baby is a fireman, my baby.
So Katy, you were raised in suburban Texas, which is Spicewood, which is about 30 minutes outside of Austin. And from like what I gather, your parents sound like very chill and interesting people. They are highly active and involved in their church and raised you as such. They are lawyers that have law backgrounds, very open-minded and empathetic. What do you know of their backstory, their like professional backstory and their spiritual backstory, and how they came to be like so dedicated to their faith? And also, like, what about this cheerleader thing?
So that is a really good question, and only partially invasive. So, so my mom actually hasn't practiced law since I was born, but I I think they both went to law school at the University of Houston. My dad is an intellectual property lawyer for this company that basically makes like swipey card keys to get into places.
Like a fob.
Big fob. They have the market cornered on fobs, apparently. So they met while they were teaching cheerleading camps. In the late 80s, I believe, or mid 80s. And like kind of met, had a little thing, didn't really see each other again for another 6 months. But I think by then, both of them, for some reason, had started feeling like they wanted to be more intentional about their faith. I'm pretty sure all of what I'm saying is right. But
So it
not
sounds like they
100%.
weren't raised like hardcore the way you were in the Christian world.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, for sure. So I think they both came from like pretty culturally Christian backgrounds, and like my grandmother on my mom's side was super devout and adorable, and she lived with us for a long time. But not it doesn't seem to me like they came from faith backgrounds that were more in depth than sort of like going to church and being really active in the church. And also, I suppose at the time that they would have been growing up, the American church sort of across the board would have been a little bit less like charismatic and touchy-feely than it might be on average now. So it was probably just a little bit less of like an emotionally intense experience. So I don't know how they wound up like being the type of folks that they are right now, but I think that they've always found a sense of community through the church, and I think they've always viewed it as a place where they can help people heal from stuff and also heal from their own stuff. And so I think that has been their entry point for like the intense engagement that I saw growing up, which is, I think, a lovely way of relating to that pocket of America. There's like I feel like everyone kind of at some point is like, oh, my parents could never have tried harder, or they were trying really hard or doing the best they can. But I felt very aware of that even as a little kid, just because like the books on our bookshelf, even now at my parents' house, are all like marriage, biblical marriage, like spousal conflict, whatever stuff, or like how to raise kids stuff, or like how to be a better Christian or a better member of your community. And so like there are just like literal bookshelves, or just sort of proof that they were really doing their homework. I think partially because both of them are like children of divorce, and they were like, we clearly don't know how to do this. We got to figure out how to do this. And so I guess maybe the church was a place for them to figure that out together.
You and your siblings were homeschooled, and it sounds like it was very easy to be homeschooled in Texas. And also, like, your parents wanted to keep you away from bad influences for a little bit longer. You went to high school, a private high school, but what impact do you think being homeschooled has had on your personality and ability to connect with the world?
I'm assuming a whole lot. I did have a reasonably sort of like gentle personality as a little kid, and now I'm a total asshole.
Yeah, you seem like
I grew up into a monster. No, but I was like a sweet, probably sensitive little kid, as far as I recall, and there's a reasonably large possibility that if I had been sent to public school at like a very young age, wouldn't have been picked on entirely, I suppose, but someone might have kind of like kicked the sensitive artsiness out of me a little bit younger, which would have not been ideal. So I don't know, but I do think that being isolated like that, because it is kind of isolating to be homeschooled sometimes, especially in like the area that we lived in, like, is technically suburban but feels very rural a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. So I think that the choices that my parents made in educating us were pretty conducive to turning out weirdos.
I mean, like mixing that in with like a youth group, summer camp forever type of situation, then you get a whole bunch of embarrassing kids.
Oh yeah, truly. I mean, like youth group summer camp was like an unbelievably just like intense experience for me every year. And I think probably mostly because it was just like I wasn't used to being around that many people of my own age constantly. And also there's like a lot of yelling because it's a summer camp. Yeah. The thing I remember most about being homeschooled is that there was like a lot of time in that wasn't structured at all. So there wasn't a huge sense of routine in our household that I remember, but that did allow me to kind of like really wander around in kind of an odd way as a kid and sort of entertain myself by talking to trees or writing little stuff down or it was a lot of time doing sort of nothing that I imagine is helpful in,
it sounds like important nothing
work. Yes, it was a lot of important nothing, and I don't plan on having kids, but I if I did, I would want that for them, I think. Yeah, it is like that kind of that unstructured experience of time, or a way of moving through the world for a while at least, where time is like pretty irrelevant. Yeah, so yeah, something like that.
That's cool. And you mentioned and have talked about feeling isolated while being homeschooled. How did you reckon with that as a young person, like if that isolation translated to loneliness? And then how did you see yourself like compensating for that when you were no longer homeschooled?
Did
you start
I'm sorry. The first part of the question was like how. So if the isolation led to loneliness, which it did. What did I do with that?
Yeah, like when you're like, oh, I'm no longer isolated, I'm going to go crazy and like crack 10 beers at once and do keg stands or like what, you know.
Totally. I mean, I think that I probably was relating to kids my own age, like whenever we started going to high school, in like a reasonably performative way, in the sense that like I really didn't know how people just like hang out,
right?
Like honest to God, and sometimes I still get that feeling, where like I just haven't been to quite enough sleepovers to really know how to act right at this moment.
You're like, is this the part where we talk to the trees in the sleepover?
Yes. Like, I'm not sure, like, do we be like a little bit mean but funny here, or do we like not be? It's hard to tell. So I really had a pretty decent time in high school, all things considered. I think I remember like having a crush on a boy whenever I first showed up, and I had really long hair, And then like I cut my hair to the length that it is now when I was 16, like a few weeks after I met him. And he was like, I literally heard through other people that he was like not into it. He was like, nope, that doesn't do it for me. Like in sort of like a biblical womanhood way, apparently. So there was a little bit, I wish I had acted out more, and I wish I had argued with people a little bit more in high school because I was a little bit too compliant. But I don't know. I think me and my siblings and like a few friends of ours were probably representing the like weird liberal-y kids. And that sounds crazy to say, but everybody else in that environment was pretty hardcore evangelical in like a very traditional Southern Baptist way for the most part, and also pretty far right in general. That is super in general, but yeah, I don't know if I answered the question, to be honest.
Well, I'm interested in like in thinking about that and thinking about my high school experience, like if I look in my high school yearbook, and looking at all the seniors, there's only one girl, my friend Japhne, who had a short haircut, you know?
Yeah.
So like your decision to cut your hair when you're 16 sounds really interesting.
Yeah, it was I don't remember why I did it. I do recall I left like one little like long piece.
The rat tail.
I braided it. Yeah, it was like a tiny rat tail, and I was like, "This is awesome." Stayed on there for a while, but Padawan braid aside, I probably came across as like fairly non-traditional. I didn't like hate everyone I went to high school with. But it didn't really get close to anybody except for like a couple of people who I'm like still friends with now.
Sure.
And we all made a record recently in Alabama. So, yeah, it's the older I get, the more I realize that that environment was like pretty darn far right and like pretty darn fundamentalist. And I didn't quite grasp that at the time, but now it's a little bit horrifying. But cool for the most part. Most part unscathed, for sure.
I do have a couple questions about your high school that I'll fast forward to because we're talking about it. So it does sound like you have some very complicated feelings about this. It was a private conservative Christian high school where you transitioned from homeschooled to like where your parents, it sounds like, were open-minded. They had books on the shelf that were like how to be a better parent or how to be a better partner, flexible to ideas like you bringing home Led Zeppelin, you know, that them being like not having a problem with it.
Sure.
To like a private conservative Christian high school that had strict rules about hairstyles and a dress code.
Oh, yeah.
What was that transition like for you?
It was weird mostly. I don't think super highly of that high school, to be completely honest. I don't know why, but it didn't feel like that much of a shift in like timbre of religious flavor or whatever at the time. I think partially because a lot of fundamentalist churches, even if they are like really hardcore about stuff, tend to present now as sort of like friendly, non-denominational, open to people and not judgmental assholes. Like just as a matter of branding, that's what the culture seems to have headed towards. So people like my parents who absolutely like got along with everyone at Faith Academy and with people who were much more conservative than they were. Like, they could definitely all vibe together. It all sort of feels the same until you get like fairly into until you're fairly integrated into a church congregation. A lot of like technically non-denominational churches in the American South particularly are sort of indistinguishable from each other. So like, just because I think that they've all sort of turned towards the idea that they want church to be accessible and like modern and non-intimidating, which I'm sure is real, but it really can just be incredibly hard to tell among non-denominational churches which are going to be like relatively safe places to have doubts or explore things, and which ones are going to be like toxic and dangerous and bad and scarring, because everyone kind of has adopted the same language, I think. To be fair, I have not like rolled up to an evangelical church in quite some time, nor a non-denominational one, but everyone I don't know if you're familiar with like Hillsong, but it's like a mega church that is sort of youth oriented and projects like coolness and hipness and friendliness. And everyone kind of had, everyone's using that same language in a way that, can really just set you up for an experience where it can be surprising. Wow, the structure of the sentence is completely gone. Hang on. But the extent to which I think like a language has emerged under evangelical non-denominational Christianity, it's pretty easy to think that you're talking about something with someone or on the same page as like most of your church body, and then suddenly realize that you're not.
Can you give an example?
Yeah, it's totally. So like, I suppose the best example would be maybe like sort of like hotter topics. So like the way that people talk about, so beliefs about women is probably the like simplest one that I can speak the most to. Nobody's going to say anything overtly sexist or horrible for the most part in most non-denominational churches. And all of them would probably, if pressed, would affirm like basic feminism related ideas. However, some of those churches do actually a surprisingly good job of honoring the perspectives of the women in their congregation, treating them as valuable, like and leaders, and generally just treating them as full members of the community or the leadership or the congregation or whatever. But most of them are not great at that, even though they're all probably going to say roughly the same thing. So it's really hard to tell when you walk in whether you are walking into a congregation that sort of fully values the women in the church, or is making them all teach Sunday school and will maybe have a sermon once a year about like submission to husbands. It's just really hard to tell until you really get to it, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Wow. All right.
Yeah.
So,
and again, haven't stepped into a church in a long while, but that is my recollection and hunch still, I suppose.
right. And that's all kind of equated to your experience in this like conservative Christian high school.
Yeah, for sure. So, yes. So, in regards to where I went to high school, kind of the same thing where, like I was saying before, like as I get older, the more I realize like, oh my God, that was quite a fundamentalist place. That was quite a politically right place. And just that was just like kind of a weird upbringing. Actually.
Have you like talked to your parents about their decision to send you to that high school? Because it sounds like they are very different than that.
They are. Well, so because the people at that high school were...
Are you saying
also,
it was like kind of hard to tell on the outside that you're like, this is like exactly what we're looking for, and then you stepped in and you're like, oh shit, there's some dark stuff happening in here.
Right. Well, and yeah, because everyone was using the same language and talking about things in the same way. And like for like the most part, by and large. And my parents also, like, while very thoughtful people and pretty flexible ideologically, they weren't like progressive by any means. They were just like not as sort of like they weren't as fundamentalist to their core as the people who were administrating that high school tended to be.
Okay.
But again, it was hard to tell because we were all using the same language for the most part. It was also kind of hard to tell because like it was a newer school. Like I think it had only been founded like 15 years ago or something like that.
Okay.
And so we would go like, we went 3 days a week and then we would study at home on Tuesday and Thursday. And like there were uniforms, but like they were pretty simple. They were just like polo and khakis. So NBD. And yeah. And I mean, it's just hard to, so like a couple friends of mine, were like who are out as queer or gay now or transgender even, were like constantly terrified while we were in high school, and I think honestly I was just oblivious to most of it. And so like as I've talked to them and as I've looked back on being in high school, like it's more alarming to me now, but at the time I was just trying to be friends with everybody. So I don't know if yeah.
So in your like press and interviews, like you've been pretty outspoken about your relationship with religion and with like Jesus as a young person and then losing it as an adult, which like we'll get to in a bit. But first,
Totally.
Christian music. I think in talking about this, you have to look at it in two parts: performing in the church and listening to worship music, like as a fan. On playing the music, you have talked about singing in the choir and playing bass in the church's worship band. Now that you are older, how do you reflect on starting your musicianship in the church?
Yeah, actually, I had a lovely conversation with my mom about this a couple of days ago. But something that I love about churches, or that I am glad exists, rather, is that because we are making music for Jesus, right? Jesus accepts us as imperfect. And so in a lot of churches, it's okay if the worship band or the worship music is imperfect, because musical perfection is not the point. And so that, combined with like sort of a general lack of like 40-year-olds or 35-year-olds who play bass in, you know, Spicewood, Texas, you might need to call upon a random 13-year-old girl to play bass for you. And that's great, honestly. I mean, I surely didn't know what I was doing. But it's a pretty like it's non-threatening, like no one's gonna be mean to you for messing something up. And like worship songs are like really easy to play, like and are written like that, not only so people can sing them really easily, but so that worship bands that are almost always comprised of not professional musicians, and sometimes not even very good musicians, and sometimes 13-year-old girls who just picked up a bass, they write those songs to be easy to play. So it was really, I think that was the best part of growing up in the church for me personally, is like the instincts that I picked up while I was playing in the worship band, and also like how welcoming that space really was to me as a little bitty musician. That was sort of the first place that I heard like people kind of like chat about a White Stripes album or whatever, like in between practicing songs, and like talk about music in sort of a nerdy way that was like really compelling. I was like, whoa, this guy will not shut up about Peter Gabriel. I love how he's thinking about this. Shout out to David Norris, wherever you are. So I think that's a beautiful place to start playing music. I have a lot of friends who grew up in really similar environments, and that's also where they sort of like started playing music with other people. I believe most of them agree. And I have also noticed that when I play in bands with those people, they're definitely real flexible as musicians, because worship bands tend to be sort of like in utter chaos most of the time. And also they're real good at, they're usually really good at like following, because I think it's like fairly common for worship leaders to be like, the Lord is moving me to play this other song that we were not planning on. Just like watch me for the chords or something. And so that, which is utter chaos, and doesn't
gotta
always
be
go over
flexible.
well, but so there's a lot
Like
of
you said.
flexibility that
Yeah.
totally.
So you were just mentioning this, and I loved reading about your relationships with the adults you were playing with in the church band. So you were 13 years old when you started playing, and you were like, you said that by far you were like the youngest person by like 25 years. So these adults were like turning you on to new music, and I'm sure just like generally being very good role models. Especially as someone who feels differently about faith now, how did you hold on to that goodness you experienced in making music in church, and did that help you in maintaining relationships with the people that you still love who are practicing Christians?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so to be fair, all of the practicing Christians that I'm close to are like pretty darn open-minded, or I would say are like aware of where I am in my faith sort of vaguely, and so we don't really feel the need to like get into it all that much. Like, to be completely honest, like the people that like wound up showing me a lot of music like in that worship band, who again is like literally David and Gail Norris and Suzanne Zuka of Austin, Texas. Like still feel like very dear friends of mine. Like I saw Suzanne the other day, and like she's my mom's best friend, and I played in a band with the Norris's daughter for a while, and they're just people who are really dear to me, and who I can't imagine ever like getting into conflict over faith with, and none of the Christians that I am like close to right now are trying to save me, which I am realizing is like a beautiful gift. So I'm not close with any Christians who are like worried about my soul, unless someone's not telling me something. They are I think everyone's sort of on the side of like, sure, Jesus saved my life. There may be other ways for people's lives to be saved. It is probably not my prerogative to proselytize or convert to anyone. So yeah, and I do know how to talk theology reasonably well still, and because I'm familiar with, I don't know, like a lot of talking about God or thinking about God is just like a really interesting thought experiment, if nothing else. And so like I'm down to talk about theology if anyone wants to, even though I don't quite hold to any of it. It's intellectually stimulating in a way to sort of like connect over stuff.
While at Belmont, and it sounds like also like in high school, you formed a group of artistic and musical friends that reflected what you wanted your world to look like. What does it mean for you to like have that community and make music with your friends? And how does it feel to connect with them on a musical level?
Oh, it feels really, really good, TBH. I was recently with a bunch of people. We all got tested and we quarantined, and then we all went to this super remote farm in Alabama. And I got to play through the entire album with all of them. And it was a really long day, and it took a really long time to like get a decent video of. But it's very magical to like know someone like that and to know what they are like in that context. Yeah, and I do feel like I found the best people I possibly could have to sort of form a little community, and kind of like learn together, or sort of like teach each other like how to collaborate and how to make music. And yeah, I mean, I feel super lucky. I feel super lucky to have gone to Belmont for that, because that is where that's where I got a lot of those people from, and I feel super lucky to be trusted with I feel lucky to be like trusted enough to like be led into those people's sort of like artistic lives at any level as well. I think that's really beautiful. It's really cool.
You've said some things about not wanting to, like, in other words, be seen as the girl with the acoustic guitar and the pretty voice. Can you talk about your feelings about the acoustic in relationship with your gender?
Oh wow, where do I begin? I mean, if I had to, if it was a movie, I would say that movie opens with the Teardrops on My Guitar music video, an iconically girly, sort of acoustic guitar centric cultural moment.
What is that? I don't know what that is.
Oh, so Teardrops on My Guitar is like this Taylor Swift song where she literally talks about writing a song on her guitar and then about a boy that she is crying over. And so the chorus is like, he's the reason for the teardrops on my guitar.
Oh, all right. Thank you for explaining that to me. I am old.
No, that's okay. It's a little bit niche. But yeah, so I don't know when I decided that I like didn't want to be pigeonholed in that way, but
when is that Taylor Swift from?
2006 or 7?
Okay. So I want to let you answer your question, but I also want to have a little bit of a reflection on the way that women were treated between the beginning of time and up until about 2012 or later. That like if you go back and watch TV shows like Gilmore Girls or The Office, there's like horrendously sexist comments.
No, totally.
And
yeah.
people in the 90s being like, I'm not a feminist, but that kind of stuff. And like, I'm just wondering like where your observations have been in terms of like feminism was like a dirty word up until recently.
Yeah, surely. Yeah.
So as somebody who grew up in that era where like the 90s and the like early 2000s, I think were actually like a pretty terrible time to be a woman. And like we didn't even know, we didn't even realize it. And it's gotten a little bit better, but like not great still. And I'm wondering like what your experience of like seeing all these like cultural touchstones where like, you know, the shock jock, like their whole thing is like making fun of like sensitive chicks and stuff like that. And the way that people reflect on Lilith Fair, like really like making fun of Lilith Fair, when in fact like Lilith Fair was an amazing music festival. And like the way that people rag on Indigo Girls, like they're two successful musicians who had like humongous hits, still like have a very successful career. Like what is so funny about that? Anyways, I'm going to get off my soapbox.
No, that's a cool soapbox.
Let you have the floor again.
I absolutely track with what you just said. I think that the way that I absorbed it is like the way that like that kind of sensitivity being what, you know, musical way of expressing sensitivity or emotion or you know, love, it wasn't really like you're overly whatever, this music is overly sensitive and overly emotional, and that makes these songwriters wusses or whatever, or like super duper vulnerable as people, and they seem fragile, and
women are the worst,
weak-minded. Yeah, it wasn't like, oh, these weak-minded women writing their sweet soft songs. Like, I'm sure that some of that's in there, but for me, what freaked me out the most about it is that it was talked about as though it were like an excessively like indulgent or self-obsessed way of relating to music, that of course, like, you know, similar no one really seemed to use that tone when talking about dudes with guitars and sensitive stuff going on. Like, that wasn't seen as indulgent, that was brave. And so like, I think I was way more afraid of like being seen as like indulgent or sort of like excessively self-interested and boring because of it, rather than just like not seeming like I had a tough personality. I don't know. So, and also like, I can't remember who first complained about this in my earshot, but it tends to be the case that again, like, women in those genres get the word confessional applied to them sort of a lot, or like diaristic, or personal, or whatever, way more often, like truly. And again, this does seem like another thing women are maligned, like girls writing in their diaries as like a sort of jokey shorthand for like frivolous self-interest or frivolous self-reflection. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sounds like the perception of those women, or the way that those women were marketed in popular culture, was just wrong. You know, like, human beings are complex, you know?
Right.
Tori Amos and Courtney Love are different people, you know, and they're going to have complex feelings about different things. All of the women I'm referring to are white women, by the way, and I realize that, you know,
Sure.
Which is a different conversation and a different podcast episode that we can have.
Oh, yeah, true.
Anyways, I mean, that, like, we could just go on and on and on, but I'm grateful that you shared your thoughts on it, and it yeah, like, controlling the narrative of how you're presented in the world is important, you know? And it's and it sounds like you're railing against like a man, like the way that men talk about women and the way that like women talk about women, instead of actually railing about the women themselves. You know, like, I read this.
Oh, yeah.
I read this thing that you said that like somebody called you a songstress and it made you want to burn and smash every acoustic guitar. And like, yeah, I get that. And that's like that's not a woman's fault. That's who, like, that's the patriarchy. Katy?
Yeah.
Man. All right, cool. Let's talk about being the boss. You made this record cool, dry place, and really relied on your intuition to figure out like what worked best for your songs, which is rad. How did that experience impact your confidence and ability to defend your ideas?
It made me, I think it was like the only way that I could have learned to do that. And like, I think that the people that I made it with were especially helpful in doing that. But you don't really know how to make a record until you make a record. And I definitely did not. But the people who made it with me, Logan Chung and Alberto Seawald, who co-produced it, I think in particular, were, I think, fairly understanding and really encouraging about, like, I think that they sensed that I felt like I didn't know what I was doing, like, disproportionately, and was like sort of anxious about it. And so they were great about giving me like a little extra time to articulate what I was trying to say or like, yeah, extra patient when I was trying to figure out what I thought, because it was just a whole new thing. So I think that they were both very gentle with me throughout that process. And Logan, even, who helped me demo a lot of those songs early on, was someone that I talked to about like that sort of anxiety a lot early on. And he was very like insistently encouraging me to think of myself as someone who could produce records before I was remotely able to like connect with that part of myself, I guess. But like, for instance, like I was just like, I don't know what sounds good, like I don't know what I like even, because I think I was just so like nervous about liking the wrong thing for such a long time. And he was like, okay, here's what you're gonna go do, and like had me make like a bunch of different playlists of just like, these are songs that have drums I like in them, and these are songs that have guitars I like in them. And that sounds super simple, and it really was, but like, it was almost like I didn't think I had the authority to be like, I like these drums because they're good, for fear that someone would be like, no, actually they're bad. And I would have no way of being like,
JK, I also hate them.
JK, yeah, exactly. So like I was really bad at even like knowing what I liked, and so doing that was super helpful. Yeah.
What a great experience for growing. Well, we have nearly completed the interview. There is one more thing that I would like to do. It is called the lightning round.
Sweet.
Yeah, you ready?
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah, let's go.
What is the first song you learned on the guitar?
They were at the same time. It's Crazy, the Willie Nelson version, and Blackbird.
What is your karaoke song?
The last time it was Stand By Your Man by Tammy Wynette, but it didn't go over that well. So you kind of have to be in Nashville to do that one. But yeah.
Dogs or cats or something else?
I think spiritually I'm a bird person, but dogs probably.
Oh, bird person. What's your favorite bird?
Bird. There's this one YouTube video called Stompy Bird, and it's just this like parakeet walking around, but it's like it's flapping its little feet on like a tile floor, and it's unreasonably loud, and like the comedic timing of this bird walking towards the iPhone camera is unparalleled. Highly recommend Stompy Bird. I used to not be a dog person, but I adopted a little boy in November named Gizmo, who changed my life and taught me how to love.
You've taken promo pictures with him. He has like really incredible set of teeth, right?
He does. He had half of his teeth. Not to bummer in the lightning round. He got in an accident. He got hit by a car about a month ago, but his memory lives on, and a billion pictures on my phone. So.
Oh man, I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I'm a dog person now, so you know.
What is your coffee order?
Black drip coffee, or if I'm feeling fancy, soy cortado, but very rarely.
Ooh, I tried one of those for the first time the other day. It was strong. Wow.
It is.
I did find out about a cortado in the lightning round. BT dubs. All right, first celebrity crush.
Do cartoons count?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm pretty sure it would be the dude in Atlantis, which is a Disney movie. There's like a very skinny scientist boy with like enormous gold-rimmed glasses.
Is he a good guy?
And like a butt cut. He is a good guy.
He's the good guy, yeah. I'm familiar with that film.
It is, yeah. Unfortunately, realized the other day, I was like, that's my template. There he is. All right. Cool.
Who is the nicest musician you've ever met?
Oh, gosh. We played a like streaming show with another Michael, who is a band from upstate New York, and actually put out a record on the same day we did. Everyone in that band is like the nicest person I've ever met. So yeah, definitely them. And they make music that sounds like they're nice people too. So it's really cool that it matches up.
First album you bought with your own money?
By Reliant K.
By, what is it?
Reliant K. So they would kind of fall into the CCM category.
Okay.
But yeah, sort of. A gentle pop punk.
I'm gonna look them up on YouTube and be disgusted, but can't stop watching. That'll be me. First concert.
I'm actually very proud of this one. Jesse McCartney was opening for a band called Jump 5 at Six Flags over Texas in San Antonio. And I was 9.
Wow.
Maybe?
Very on brand.
Yeah. Yeah, for real.
Flying or invisibility?
Invisibility, probably. I want to know secrets, and I want to never be embarrassed. And so that feels like ideal.
That's fair. That's the best explanation for invisibility I've ever heard.
I want to know secrets. Everyone wants to know secrets. Like, come on.
Okay, this is the last one. Make it count. Where is the most beautiful place you've ever visited?
That I've ever visited? This is mega touristy, but the first thing that comes to mind is like the first time I went to the La Sagrada Familia in Barcelona was very moving, and I understand that monument or that cathedral being there is like kind of a crippling nuisance to the people who actually live in that neighborhood, but it's a real pretty building. Unfortunately,
is that the cathedral that is still not finished?
Yes.
It's
they're close. It looks kind of like sand castle-y,
yes,
like dripping. It has like a lot of there's like a lot of Fibonacci organic math.
All the door handles are like very weirdly, they look like pieces of clay that somebody just grabbed. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. It's like every detail of it is like, whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good pick.
It's pretty. It's just darn pretty.
Well, all right, Katy. We have finished the interview. You've done the lightning round. Fairly good job. 9 out of 10. Thank you so much for talking. It's been a real pleasure. I really like your record, and I hope everything goes really well and that you don't embarrass yourself and that you're not terrified.
I do too. Thank you very much. Thank you for saying that, for real. Yeah, this has been lovely. Lovely to meet you.
Basic Folk this week was produced by Laura McCarthy. Alex Stanton of Townspeople composes our music. I'm your host, Cindy House. Basic Folk is on the American Songwriter Podcast Network. You can find all the episodes wherever you found this episode of Basic Folk or at my website, cindyhouse.net. If you liked what you heard, please share it with a friend. Okay, thank you so much for checking it out, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.